You are in a unique position also with RE/MAX Integrity also because you're a non-competing broker, meaning that you manage and supervise, but you don't actually do any real estate transactions, which I think is a huge benefit because it allows you to just be completely invested in what we're doing, as opposed to, having half or more of your focus on your own business. Not that people need to do what they got to do what they got to do, but it's just a huge benefit, I think.
It's definitely a benefit to anyone. I know, the last thing you want is if you need help with something, you can't find that person that's supposed to help you. So you make your best guess and hope it works out. I think having a non-competing managing broker is super instrumental, just knowing that you have that person that's there at the office from, this time to that time, that's really just sitting there waiting for you to tell, to ask a question or ask for help or, and it also it allows me to really focus on my brokers as my people and not so much as clients and the public as my people. Like my sole purpose is to support you guys so that you can support your buyers and sellers and your people in your business.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I've enjoyed it. So,
so Daniel, if you could help explain, like people that are kind of watching this and not understanding competing versus non-competing, can we kind of go into that? I know us in this room know what that means. But.
Sure. Yeah. Well, a lot of people may not even realize that. I have a principal broker's license, which is the same license that you have, but I am not the managing broker. So I could open my own office. I could do your job technically. Or at least I have the license to do so. I don't think I could do your job at your level.
or want to.
Or want to. Right, yeah, let's just put that out there. Right. But I'll back that up. So in the state of Oregon, there is real estate brokers, licensed real estate brokers. In other states, they're referred to as agents or salespeople, or there's a lot of different terms for it. In Oregon, they're called brokers. And then the management level license is called a principal broker's license. And everybody who has a real estate license has to work under a principal broker. And they have to work in an office, and they have to have somebody that supervises their paperwork. And in most cases, it's just another broker in the office that's taken those duties, and they also do real estate transactions. So they are technically a competing broker. So like the most obvious example of like why that could be an issue is like, say you and I are doing a transaction together and you represent the seller and I represent the buyer, and there's some sort of negotiation that goes on. Like for me to have to ask you for help or something or a piece of advice, you still have to have your client's best interest in mind, but also have to be able to give me advice, and that can get tricky. And there's other reasons, but does that make sense? It
makes total sense. I think one of the other things too is none of my brokers have to worry about me getting leads that could be going to them. I don't need leads. So all of our leads that come into the office, if random phone calls, walk-ins, anything, those go directly to our people. I don't have any interest in them outside of my brokers turning them into a transaction or a client. So I think that's probably the number one thing that I hear as an advantage from other brokers is that they don't have, I'm not here to get leads or any of that.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that, but that could be a thing.
And that's a kudos to you for him not even realizing or understanding that that's a possibility that can happen in the process. Like that just means you've done a good job of making sure that that's, never been an issue or not even could be an issue. But also that fiduciary responsibility, I think it's huge that if you as a person can't go and ask a question of your managing broker to gain knowledge and insight because you're concerned about the conflict that's there, that agent may not necessarily grow in their business because they're afraid to go to that next person and ask and make more mistakes, things like that. That's an inherent risk.
Right.
You and I did a deal together. Yep. And you were like, well, I don't think I can ask you advice. And I'm like, well, you can, but that's also why we have her. Yeah. It is. You have to. I would imagine if you were in that role, you'd have to be really careful about what you say and how you say it and all that kind of stuff. And I felt like Nancy was a competing broker, but I never felt like that was a thing,
You have to have the right mentality to do that too. You have to truly be able to put on a different hat. And, you know, you can't necessarily set aside your fiduciary duty to your client, but you have that same kind of duty to your brokers as well. So you really do have to put on those different hats. And I think from a broker standpoint, coming and asking the person you're supposed to ask if they're the other side of that transaction, I think that hat just, it's a gray area. I like that with not being non-competing. It's black and white. I'm only here to help my brokers.
Yeah.
I think it would depend too on like the competing broker. Like I trust you, and I feel like when we did our deal, I could ask you questions, and I know that you had still my best interest in mind, and you would answer me truthfully and to your best of your ability, that or send me to Tiffany. But some of the brokers that are out there
ruthless
are ruthless and may not be so trustworthy, and I would be not as likely to ask them questions.
Yeah. And just going on the ruthless thing, like I like to think that most people have good intentions, but there are those occasional people out there who are trying to, like, you know, twist it some way to make it work for them. But it's easy for me, and I know it's easy for her to just be like, no, this is, if I was in your shoes, this is what I would do.
Right.
You know, that may not work for the seller or the client. Go ahead, Dan.
Well, I know, because you can take yourself out of the actual transaction itself and answer it on a higher level. I mean, I know that the question may be transactional or very specific to the transaction, but you can look at it differently. There's other individuals that if they don't have the right intentions, or they need a paycheck, or they need this, that's amazing what it does to skew the perception of, they think they're quote unquote helping you, but it's coming from a bias because they need a closing in 30 days.
Yeah, that commission breath can really be.
That's the hard part. So
very decisive.
If you're
commission breath.
if you're not worried about commission breath, then you can freely answer questions. So I think it fits in both sides, whether it's you as the managing broker, or you not caring more for the transaction than a paycheck, which I think all of us in the industry, lending, real estate, we all need to get to that point that the transaction is worth more than any paycheck. And
Somebody write that down.
It's recording.
It needs to be written down too.
It's not good or bad. The transaction is never worth the paycheck. The transaction needs to stand on its own.
Right.